Okay, so we are back, and yes, it has been a couple of days now, but your boy went out to Philly, which was not a great experience because they lost the Super Bowl, and I'm pretty sure I was in the middle of gunfire or fireworks in the form of Roman candles being shot off at people's windows. So yeah, advice to everyone, don't go to Philly the day they lose the Super Bowl. But today's video is the follow-up to the How Tommy Fury Beats Jake Paul video, which I think a lot of you guys saw and went,
Wait, Tommy's not gonna beat Jake? How could you say that?
not understanding there's a part 2 to this series, and that happens today because we know now how Tommy Fury is going to have to fight, in my opinion, to beat Jake. But how does Jake beat Tommy? And I think this is the most important question of this fight because, again, on paper, Tommy should win this fight. He has the boxing physique, tools, reach, everything you would want to build a fighter from, but is he a fighter? Jake Paul has some things too, and one thing in particular I call the great equalizer. So without taking a page out of the Fury handbook and continuing to delay this any further, let's talk about it. This is how Jake Paul beats Tommy Fury. The breakdown. Let's go. All right, so similar thing to what we did in the Tommy video. I'm gonna give you guys 5 things Jake has to do to beat Tommy. And by doing these 5 things, it doesn't necessarily mean Jake is 100% going to beat Tommy. It just means he has the best possible opportunity to do so, in my opinion. And let's start right away with number 1, no wasting time, which is coincidentally exactly what Jake needs to do in this fight. Jake has to start fast. Now, I know a lot of you guys watching this are gonna hit me with the Drewski voice. Wade,
what do you mean by that?
I don't mean that Jake needs to empty the tank in the first round and get this fight over with quickly or else Tommy's gonna overwhelm him. No, that's not what I mean. I mean Jake needs to establish early that Tommy has to be aware defensively. In other words, Jake can't take back steps early. The minute that bell rings, he's gonna have to walk forward and plant his foot in the ground like he was trying to be a part of a new Mr. Beast I planted 10,000 trees across America video. He is going to have to cement himself in the center. Because Tommy always does a good job early in fights of establishing himself and gaining that momentum by pushing his volume and his jab forward. Jake cannot allow him to get started quickly. Allowing Tommy to get started with his volume and trying to come back and answer it is not the way to beat him because I don't think that Jake and Tommy have the same style of output. Whereas Tommy's gonna throw a ton to land a couple, Jake is precise with his shots. He does have a decent amount of output, but it is all thrown with the intent to damage. Jake doesn't really throw a lot of shots to open up others outside of his jab, which we're gonna talk about in a second. But main point of number 1 is Tommy is a locomotive. I called him a technician in the last video for a reason. To get comfortable, he needs to build momentum, and he does that through volume and stepping on your toes early. Jake has to establish himself center of the ring, not taking back steps, not letting Tommy dictate pace and range, because if not, Tommy is going to be very much front foot aggressive. Without any answer to that, Jake's gonna be in some trouble early. But if Jake can stay in the middle and not be pushed around to the back of the ropes, where again, he found himself in a little bit of trouble with Anderson Silva, and he's able to just stay there, like he's not fucking leaving. Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street style. He's just not going anywhere. So if he can do that, he's going to be successful, but needs our number 2 point to complete that process, and that is Jake Paul has to out-jab Tommy Fury. That seems crazy to say. I understand. Now, again, let me clarify what I mean by out-jab Tommy. He doesn't have to throw more jabs than Tommy. That's not what I mean. He has to neutralize Tommy's jab. And the one way we've seen Tommy kind of shy away from throwing his jab is when someone meets him before, again, he builds momentum. Go back to the Jordan Grant fight, go back to even the Anthony Taylor fight when Tommy would start his combinations, but we met in the in-between, right? He wasn't able to get 2, 3, 4 shots going. That reset would almost stifle Tommy's forward movement at all. So not only could he not move forward, he was struggling to land his jab when it was caught in the middle, right? Something that Jake does have and he uses fairly well is his timing. He's able to time shots, even if it isn't just his jab or his hook. We all know the right hand has great timing and it finds a home a lot. But Jake is able to time Tommy. If he's able to catch Tommy before he gets started, right? The jabs are going to come from Tommy. He's going to be bomb, bomb, bomb on his way in. But if Jake's able to, again, throw in the in-between, stick one on him without moving backward, that's going to stifle a little bit of that momentum and forward movement and forward pressure from Tommy, which again makes Tommy fight on the back foot. It's easier for me to sit here and say it than do it because Tommy does continue to move forward and he does have a great jab and his motor is continuously going. But when you make Tommy defend himself going backward, he does struggle to the point where sometimes his defense is just him framing out. Like legitimately, 2007 in your school dance, hitting the crank that soldier boy. That's what Tommy does off the back foot, right? He likes to frame. He likes to get himself away. But when that happens, it does once again stifle forward momentum and it makes him defend himself. And that frame out doesn't really work. Tommy's chin goes straight up into the air, almost like another Tommy that we know in the influencer boxing scene. And he eats unnecessary shots because his hands are already low. His guard isn't tight. And sometimes he doesn't recognize when he's in range or not. And again, we're using single instances here to try to prove points, but these are the points where Tommy does struggle. Jordan Grant was able to catch Tommy multiple times by switching stances moving forward and covering that switch stance and covering ground with his punches, something that Jake also does. So again, you have to use your jab if you're Jake. It doesn't mean you have to go jab for jab with Tommy, because that's not going to happen. Tommy, I can almost guarantee, is going to throw more jabs and potentially land more than Jake, but Jake has to have an answer. He can't just go backward and allow Tommy's jab to dictate the fight. If that happens, it's going to be a long night for Jake. One thing Jake does get caught up doing sometimes is overthrowing his jab, right? When he's in range, sometimes he's able to be countered because he does overcommit to his jab, right? He'll throw his jab out, throw it out, and then one time really throw it out. And that's when you've seen him get countered over the top by Tyron Woodley that put him into the ropes, or at the end of the first round where Anderson Silva caught him with a big left hand behind it. Does Tommy have the ability to counter Jake off the jab? Yeah, he absolutely does. And that momentum from Jake leaning in and Tommy throwing that right hand or hook or whatever it is, or his uppercut that we've seen him be very successful with, it's dangerous ground for Jake to be on, so you can't necessarily over commit to that jab either. But again, being on that front foot, planting it in the ground and saying, Tommy, you're going to have to make that decision to either run through me or you're going backward, and doing so by being confident in his jab is the best case scenario for Jake early on, where Tommy's full of piss and vinegar and he comes out and starts jabbing like a rock'em sock'em robot on fucking cocaine. That's gonna happen. So Jake has to be able to be confident in the fact he can hang in the pocket with Tommy. And again, when they do trade, Jake's got to find something in the in-between where Tommy's not moving his head off the center line, or potentially do the number 3 thing that I think is probably one of the most important in Jake's repertoire and hopefully in his game plan. Sometimes it's not as easy as just saying, okay, don't let Tommy walk forward or plant your foot in the ground and don't move. That's not necessarily how fighting works. Attacks come from different spots, angles change, and things just need to be reset. But one thing Jake can take advantage of, just like that lazy relative you have in the family that has all the potential in the world but just never gets off the couch and does it, just needs that extra little push. What I'm trying to say is Jake needs to influence Tommy's movements. That is something that I think is a major key in this fight. In exchanges, Tommy already lets his jab fade him to his left side continuously, and he circles to that left side over and over and over. It's very repetitive the way Tommy moves, and then he will pivot out and circle back to his right. But in range, it's rare you see him giving any variety in the way he moves when he attacks. It's almost always circling to his left. All Jake has to do in some of these instances, not move back, but change the angle and influence Tommy to continue moving to his left. Only allow him to move to his left. And I think the way to do that is for Jake to attack the back half of Tommy's body in orthodox. So the body, the shoulders, jabbing to that back eye, the back side of the face. Pushing Tommy, like Beyonce used to say, to the left, to the left. Every fucking thing that Tommy does is moving to the left. All right, so I ad-libbed a little bit in the song. I don't think that's in the actual published version, but you get what I mean. By capitalizing on influencing movement like that, and even in the clinch sometimes, being able to play that game of tug of war and on break, changing that angle to get Tommy to, again, slide to his left. And again, you're probably asking yourself, Wade, why is it such an important thing that Tommy moves to his left? Why do they want to keep him on that left side? Well, that leads us to number 4, and that is pretty simply because Jake absolutely in this fight has to land at least one bomb. He has to land a big shot here. Because what's the point of forcing people to make mistakes if you can't make them pay for it? You give Tommy that feeling of safety by alleviating all the pressure you're given with the lead hand, pushing him to his left where he's already comfortable going off his jab and already fades into him. Doing that round after round and you walking him into that position over and over is going to give him that feeling of safety. And just as he feels that, you go jab to the body, but instead of turning that angle, instead of allowing Tommy to go to his left, all of a sudden you change that angle back. And you step off to your right, and you throw that right hand over the top as Tommy is influenced into it. That is the big shot that Jake needs. And again, for this fight to go in Jake's favor, in my opinion, he does have to land that one, because number 5 point, and probably the most important, this fight has to be difficult for Tommy. It needs to be something he's never experienced. Jake has to make Tommy fight, not box. He has to make him fight. And again, I think this is the most important part of what I'm telling you guys, because Tommy has been able to kind of do whatever he wants in almost every single one he's been in. Again, outside of the Jordan Grant fight. You know why? Because Jordan Grant made him fight a little bit. He made him scrap a little, and you saw Tommy a bit uncomfortable, especially early. Later on, Tommy composed himself and got that win, but it wasn't like Jordan Grant was flat out outboxing Tommy and keeping him on his back foot with just the jab. No, it was a little bit of controlled chaos with big shots over the top and switching stance, lead uppercuts through the guard and continuing that pressure, sometimes falling into that pressure. And Tommy did struggle just a bit with that, but now you compound on that. This is someone that Tommy does have a personal vitriol for. And the guy across from Tommy isn't the most orthodox boxer there is, and he's not going to be as technically polished as you may see from other guys that are 6, 7, 8-0 as professionals. This is why I think Jake, yes, he has to box Tommy, and yes, he has to stay behind his jab, and he has to stay fundamental, but he does have to make Tommy go through adversity here. And that's gonna have to mean he does 1 through 4 that we talked about, but also he has to show a little bit of that dog in it that we've seen in the Tyron Woodley 1 fight when he got in trouble. In the Anderson Silva fight when it got late into that fight and he needed to pull out a big moment to solidify that victory. These are things Tommy has not done. He has not experienced this kind of adversity on this stage, on this level, and for him to do it the first time against Jake in the main event, it's gonna be a detriment to him, because let's be honest about something really quickly. Both guys think they're far better than the other. Jake thinks he's far better than Tommy is. Tommy thinks Jake is just a YouTuber. I'm sure in some way, both guys are going to be surprised by what the other brings on fight night. But if this fight goes to a place neither of them have ever been, I think Jake is more mentally prepared for that position than Tommy is. And what they've gone through to this point, Jake has been in harder fights, and you can say that's a bad thing for Jake. You could say he shouldn't have been in a hard fight with Tyron Woodley. He shouldn't have been in a hard fight with Anderson Silva if he's going to go in there with Tommy Fury. But being in those places, being pushed into adversity, being pushed into a place where basically his back is literally against the ropes, and he has to find something to push himself to that next level to get a victory, to go out and actually win it. That dog inside has to come out. Tommy hasn't had to do that yet. I'm not saying he can't. Jake absolutely has to make this fight harder than Tommy thinks it's going to be. You can call it deep waters, you can call it late in the fight, wherever it is, Jake has to take him there. Then, mentally especially, he has to break him. Can Jake do all that? Those 5 things? Yeah, he absolutely can, but will he? I don't have those answers. In fact, I think this fight, I've been saying it for years now, is so competitive because of the duality of styles. Because Tommy is a proper boxer, a guy that has great footwork. He does have a nice jab. He does naturally possess ability, where Jake has just come into this scene like the fucking Trojan horse, breaking the doors down. And yes, he's improving day by day, by fight, but we still don't know skill-wise as a proper boxer what Jake is going to bring, again, against another boxer. So there's so many great questions here, but Jake wants to beat Tommy, has to start fast, put his foot in the ground, counter Tommy's volume jab with Jake's stiff jab that puts some damage on Tommy and again alleviates some of that pressure. He's got to influence Tommy's movement from left to right. I don't want to do it again. Sorry, that was my Drake reference. But he does have to influence Tommy's movement, push him to his left, land a big shot, and by doing all those things, couple onto it the most important thing left, and that is put Tommy in a position he's never been. He calls himself a fighting man. Jake absolutely needs to make him fight. He does those things, I think Jake can win this fight, but I don't have those answers. We are less than 2 weeks away from Jake and Tommy Fury. If you guys disagree or if you have thoughts of your own, let me know down below. How does the problem child turn the tables on Tommy Fury and potentially earn a WBC world ranking, which is a little surprising? I don't have those answers just yet, but on February 26th, I guess we'll find out.